Welcome to my little corner of the internet. My name is Katherine. I shall be your hostess. Today's topic is alternative economics, the videos where I try to get the most out of my economics degree. Hey, if you could you please subscribe to my channel? Because I'm trying to hit 100 people by the end of the quarantine. So today we're going to be talking about economic sanctions. First, we're going to have to be asking, what are economic sanctions? Economic sanctions are commercial and financial penalties applied by one or more countries against a targeted self-governing state, group, or individual. Economic sanctions are not necessarily imposed because of economic circumstances. They may also be imposed for a variety of political, military, and social issues. Alrighty then, so to put it in a real-world equivalent, it's like that kid on the playground that has the ball, and then all of a sudden he says, "My ball, my rules." And most of the other kids on the playground are like, "All right, man, we'll play by your rules. You get the ball." But then you get a couple of others that just sort of wander off, and then the guy with the ball is like, "We're going to kick your ass if you don't come play ball." And that takes away about, I would say, 96% of the population decides to play ball. And that's just sort of how it happens. And that other 4%, those other 4 people, we call North Korea, Cuba, Venezuela, and Iran. I want to just say that as a middle-aged lesbian, I would pretty much die in a lot of these regimes. So I'm not for it. I'm actually for a change. And to bring about that change, we can't use the same policies that are failing. I just want to point that out before some dickhead in the comments is like, "Oh, you just want to keep this and get everything in the dictator, blah, 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 blah." So no. I want change. But part of that is admitting that some of these policies are failing. So there has been a failed policy of sanctions against North Korea, Iran, Cuba, and Venezuela. And they haven't worked for several reasons. Where do we start? Why are these countries not particularly susceptible to the sanctions? And I would say that they have to have a few main cues. First of all, they have to have industry. They have to have agriculture. They have to have natural resources. And they have to have an authoritarian centralized government. And don't get me wrong, I don't think that there are abundances of any of those in these countries. I don't think North Korean children are getting pretty princess birthday parties and unicorns given to them when they turn 6 years old. I don't think that. I think that the conditions are probably pretty shitty. However, they're just enough for each of these countries to survive, which makes them very different from all the other countries out there where sanctions are applied. Now, I know what you're saying. It takes a while. It takes a lot of time for sanctions to work. You're just not giving it time. Let's look at these countries. Venezuela, the new kid on the block, 20 years. They've been pretty much living under sanctions for 20 years. Iran, since the 80s, that makes it 40 years. Cuba, since the 60s, that makes it 60 years. North Korea, since the 50s, that makes it 70 years. And now I'm all for giving things time to work. I mean, you want to give it a little longer and see if it works? Go for it. But once we hit the 100 years mark, can we just agree it's not working and change policy? And that you're not affecting a regime change or doing anything? That it's just simply not working? And you need to think of a different way. Now, I want to point out that, let's take the case of North Korea. The sanctions aren't working, but people don't even know the sanctions aren't working in North Korea. They've been under sanctions for so long. How many generations? There is barely a living person in North Korea that remembers a time before sanctions. They don't have any good times to compare it to. They don't know what goodness is to know that they've had it taken away from them. You know, Cuba's a little bit different, Iran's a little bit different, Venezuela's a little bit different. You know, and I also hear you screaming, oh, but Katherine, you know, the USSR backed Cuba and North Korea up until the 90s. Yes, up until the 90s. So instead of 70 years of failed policy, that just makes it 30 years of failed policy. You still want to wait for the 100 years? You go for it. Some of these countries, we need to actually open up a little bit before we tighten back down again if you want sanctions to work. I don't think they're real. Like, I don't think they'll work in any of these countries for the exceptions I said before. However, for them to actually work, we would have to really loosen those sanctions, give it a generation, and then tighten the sanctions again. Because then people would know what they're losing. But in a lot of those countries, people don't. What do you think? And if you've made it this far, thank you very much for watching. It's much appreciated.